Have you ever noticed how sometimes you sabotage the very things you say you want? You ask for love but push it away. You crave success, but procrastinate until it slips through your hands. You want peace, but choose the same chaos again and again. Why does this happen? It's not because you're broken. It's because there is a part of you you've buried. The part you've been taught to fear, ignore, or silence. Carl Jung called this the shadow. And here's the truth. As long as you avoid it, it doesn't disappear. It grows stronger. It hides in your habits, your tone of voice, your passive-aggressive replies, your need to always be right, your urge to run when things get too real. It becomes the quiet architect of a life you never meant to build. But what if you stopped running? What if for once you turned and looked directly into that shadow? Not with fear, but with curiosity. You'd start to see the patterns, the way your anger hides your sadness, the way your need to control masks your fear of being hurt, the way you chase love to avoid feeling empty. And suddenly life begins to make sense, not because it changed, but because you did. You start to notice the emotional loops, how every argument feels the same, how every relationship ends the same. And you begin to ask, is it really them? Or is it something in me? Awareness cracks the illusion. And once you see your shadow, you can no longer pretend it isn't there. Because now it has a name, and with that name comes power. And here's what most people never realize. The shadow doesn't just hold your pain, it also holds your power. Everything you've suppressed, your anger, your fear, your wildness, your truth, it's all energy, waiting to be reclaimed. But first, you have to stop being afraid of your own reflection. You have to stop blaming the world for the storms that started inside you. This is not about shame. It's about responsibility. It's about finally seeing that the same part of you that self-destructs is the part that, once understood, can set you free. Most people avoid the shadow because they think facing it means losing control. But in truth, it's the only way to gain it. Because once you own your darkness, no one can use it against you again. Have you ever noticed how you keep choosing pain? Even when you say you want peace, you say you want love. But the moment someone gets close, you push them away. You say you're tired of chaos, yet somehow you always find yourself back in it. It's not because you're weak. It's not because you want to suffer. It's because something inside you believes that this is all you deserve. And the most dangerous part? You don't even realize you're doing it. You've made sabotage look like self-protection. You've made emotional chaos feel like home. You've mistaken fear for instinct and silence for peace. Because when pain is all you've known, peace feels suspicious. Love feels unsafe, and being seen feels terrifying. So you hide behind overthinking, behind busyness, behind control. But deep down you're scared, not of failing, but of what happens if you actually succeed. This is not failure. This is the shadow, quietly running your life from within. So where does it come from? This voice that tells you you're not enough. It wasn't born with you. It was planted. A look of disapproval, a moment of rejection, a voice that said, "Be quiet. I don't cry. Stop being so much." And you listened, you tucked away your anger, you buried your sensitivity. You laughed when it hurt. You stayed small to feel safe. Piece by piece, you abandoned parts of yourself, just to be accepted, just to belong. But those parts, the ones you silenced, judged, and left behind, didn't disappear. They became your shadow. Not evil, not broken, just misunderstood. And now that shadow lives beneath the surface, pulling strings in moments you least expect. It whispers doubts before you speak. It shakes your hand when you reach for more. It sabotages not because it hates you, but because it still believes you have to be someone else to be loved. The shadow doesn't just live inside you, then it distorts the way you see the world. What you deny in yourself, you begin to see everywhere. You judge others for being too loud, when really you fear your own voice. You call someone arrogant, but secretly you're afraid to take up space. You resent their confidence because it reminds you of the self you abandoned. This is projection, your unconscious shadow painted onto someone else's face. And suddenly you're not living in reality. You're reacting to a mirror. You get triggered, not because of what they said, but because of what it touched in you. a wound, a memory, a truth you haven't faced yet. The world isn't against you. It's reflecting you. It's showing you what still lives in your shadow. And until you see it, you'll keep fighting battles that were never about them, only about you. Triggers are not the enemy. They are messengers, signals that something inside you still needs healing. But most people don't listen. They react, they lash out, they shut down. They run, not from the world, but from themselves. You get defensive when all someone did was press a bruise you've been pretending isn't there. And that's the pattern. That's how the shadow repeats itself. Through automatic reactions you mistake for personality. You say, "That's just who I am." But it's not. It's who you became to survive. When you start observing instead of reacting, you create space. Space to choose, space to respond. And in that space, you begin to break the pattern. You begin to reclaim your power. If this content is making sense to you, click the subscribe button and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for your support. Carl Jung believed that every person carries a shadow, not because we are bad, but because we are human. The shadow is not evil by nature. It is simply everything we reject, suppress, or deny. Our anger, our envy, our fears, even our desires and talents, if they don't fit the image we want to present. As children, we learn what parts of us are acceptable and what must be hidden. So we split, we show the mask, and we bury the rest. But the buried parts don't disappear. They sink into the unconscious, and from there they wait, waiting to erupt through mood swings, addictions, projections, waiting to sabotage relationships, careers, peace of mind. The shadow is not your enemy. It's your mirror, and the longer you avoid it, the more it controls you from the dark. The shadow doesn't wear a mask. It wears your face. It hides in your habits, in your reactions, in the things you criticize in others, but never see in yourself. Jung called this projection. It's how the unconscious reveals what you refuse to face. You say someone is arrogant because deep down you repress your own confidence. You hate dishonesty, but ignore the little lies you tell yourself every day. We are most triggered by what reflects our own disowned traits. That's the trick of the shadow. It speaks loudest when we deny it exists. And the more we deny, the more power it gains. Until one day it starts making decisions for us. Not directly, but through sabotage, through compulsions, through patterns we repeat without knowing why. This is not weakness. It's unconscious programming, and it can be changed. Most people think they've conquered their darkness, when in truth they've just buried it. They avoid conflict and call it peace. They suppress anger and call it maturity. But what's repressed is never erased. It's just waiting for a weaker moment. Jung warned us, what we do not bring to consciousness appears in our lives as fate. You think it's bad luck. You think it's the world against you. But often it's the shadow, acting out from behind the curtain. It chooses your partners. It fuels your self-doubt. It whispers sabotage in the moments you need strength the most. And you obey because you mistake it for your own voice. The truth is, you don't conquer the shadow by fighting it. You heal it by seeing it, by listening, by learning what it's trying to teach you. Facing the shadow isn't comfortable. It humbles you. It shows you the parts you swore weren't there. The envy, the pride, the need to control. But this discomfort is the beginning of liberation. Because the moment you name your shadow, it loses the power to control you from the dark. You stop reacting. You start responding. You stop blaming the world and begin understanding your own inner architecture. Jung believed that true transformation doesn't happen by pretending to be good, but by integrating what you've rejected. This is not about becoming perfect. It's about becoming whole. To see the shadow is to reclaim your freedom, to stop the unconscious sabotage. Because when you turn toward what you fear in yourself, you take back everything that was used against you. And that is how you begin to heal. You think you're upset with them, their arrogance, their coldness, their constant need to be right. But what if you're not reacting to them, but to a part of yourself you don't want to see? Carl Jung called it projection, the unconscious act of seeing in others what you have rejected within. The world becomes your mirror. And every emotional trigger is a reflection of your inner conflict. You hate the manipulator, but deny how you manipulate. You resent the needy, but ignore your own longing. And here's the trap. The more you reject your shadow, the more power it gains over you. Not by force, but by reflection. Because what you don't own still finds a way to show up. Through your relationships, your reactions, and your pain. Projection doesn't just distort how you see others, it shapes how others see you. People begin to interact not with who you really are, the nuts, but with the mask you unconsciously wear. You become the fixer, the strong one, the one who never complains, not because it's true, but because it fits a role you learn to perform, to feel safe, to feel needed, to feel worthy. And the more you identify with that role, the more trapped you become. You're praised for being helpful, so you ignore your own needs. You're seen as calm, so you suppress your anger. But deep down, a war is raging, because your shadow knows you're not being honest with yourself. You're not living, you're performing. And the audience doesn't even know it's all a projection. Every time you overreact, your shadow takes the wheel. That moment of anger that felt justified, was it really yours? Or was it a projection of what you can't face within? When you judge someone for being arrogant, is it really them? Or your own insecurity crying out for validation? The shadow doesn't scream. It whispers, guides, and manipulates in ways you barely notice. That's why emotional triggers are powerful. They bypass logic. They pull you into drama. They make you fight battles that were never really about the other person. And the more you react, the deeper the pattern grows, until your life becomes a series of emotional landmines, and you're stuck trying to survive what you secretly created. To break free, you must pause, observe, and choose differently, even when it hurts. Here's the truth. You don't really see people. You see projections. That friend you envy, he reflects a dream you've abandoned. That partner you resent, she mirrors a need you've repressed. Your shadow paints the world for you. It chooses colors based on wounds, not reality. And the more unaware you are, the more distorted the image becomes. You'll blame others for what lives in you. You'll chase people who confirm your narrative. You'll sabotage connections just to prove you're unworthy. But here's the shift. When you face your shadow, you reclaim the mirror. You stop confusing others for yourself. You begin to see clearly. Not everyone is your enemy. Not every criticism is truth. Not every reaction needs a response. That's when power returns. Not through force, but through clarity. Most people think they are reacting to the world, but in truth, they are reacting to unresolved wounds. A single comment, a look, a delay in response can trigger a storm inside you. Why? Because it's not about what just happened. It's about what it reminds you of. These emotional triggers are the shadow's fingerprints. They appear whenever your past pain hasn't been processed. And the reaction is never really about the present moment. It's about a childhood rejection, an old humiliation, a forgotten betrayal. And if you're not aware, you will defend yourself with intensity that doesn't match the situation. You'll overreact, withdraw, attack, or collapse, and then wonder, why did I get so emotional? Carl Jung warned us, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Your triggers are not your enemy. They are signals, clues, doorways into the shadow. Every time you feel an intense emotion, disproportionate to the situation, pause, breathe, look inward, ask yourself, what does this remind me of? When was the first time I felt this way? Whose voice am I really hearing right now? Because your psyche is trying to resolve something it never got to finish, and it will keep recreating similar situation until you finally pay attention. This is why certain people, certain words, certain tones can make you feel 10 years old again. Not because they have power over you, but because your wound is still open. And when the wound stays unacknowledged, you keep reacting, not responding. Healing begins the moment you stop blaming the trigger and start listening to what it's pointing to. That's the real work. Emotional triggers are patterns in disguise. They show up in your relationships, your work, even your inner voice, repeating the same emotional script under a different mask. You think you're dealing with someone new, but you're really facing a familiar loop. And unless you become conscious of that loop, you'll play your role perfectly again and again. The partner who abandoned you, the boss who never sees your worth, the friend who takes too much. Different faces, same wound, same pain waiting to be felt and freed. That's how the unconscious works. It recreates what it knows, not what you want. But once you recognize the pattern, you interrupt the performance. You stop playing the victim, the fixer, the pleaser. And in that pause, you reclaim your power. You choose a different ending. Awareness is the turning point. The moment you feel a trigger, and instead of reacting, you pause, you've stepped outside the pattern. That space between emotion and action is your liberation. It's where you observe the wound without becoming it. You ask, why does this hurt so much? Whose voice is this really? Is this mine or something I inherited? You start seeing how old pain hijacks present moments, how you're not broken, just repeating. And repetition is not fate, it's a call for healing. It's a sign that the wound wants your attention, not your shame. Each time you resist the urge to lash out, to defend, to escape, you choose yourself over your programming. You stop living on autopilot. You become the observer, not the puppet. And from that awareness, you begin to rewrite your story, one conscious choice at a time. You can't transform what you refuse to see. And the shadow, it thrives on your denial. Most people run from their inner darkness, pushing it away, disguising it, or pretending it doesn't exist. But what you suppress becomes what controls you. Shadow work begins the moment you stop running and start observing. Not judging, not fixing, just watching. When anger rises, you don't explode, you inquire. When envy whispers, you don't suppress, you listen. When fear paralyzes you, you ask, where is this coming from? What does it need me to understand? This practice of awareness is not passive. It's the beginning of mastery, because every time you choose presence over reaction, you reclaim a piece of yourself. The more you witness your shadow with clarity, the less power it has to sabotage you. This is the first door, not escape, but encounter. Shadow work isn't about destroying the shadow, it's about integrating it. That angry voice you silence, it may carry a truth you've ignored. That jealousy you hide might point to desires you've denied. That fear you hate could be protecting a wound you've never healed. Carl Jung taught that the shadow holds not just your darkness, but your potential. Hidden in what you reject is what you need to grow. To do shadow work is to sit down with the parts of yourself you've judged, shamed, or disowned, and say, I see you. I'm listening now. This is not easy. These parts don't speak in words. They come in emotion, in impulse, in dreams. But when you stop fighting them, they stop fighting you. And slowly you become whole again. More real, more grounded, and finally at peace with who you are. Every emotional trigger is a mirror, a flare in your nervous system, pointing not at others, but inward. That anger at being ignored, maybe it reflects a part of you that still seeks validation. That discomfort around someone's confidence, perhaps it reveals your own buried insecurity. Carl Jung said, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. Shadow work means pausing when you're triggered, not to suppress, but to observe. Ask, what am I really feeling? Where have I felt this before? What story am I telling myself right now? Because the shadow doesn't hide in logic. It hides in reaction. And when you begin to track the pattern, you start to break it. This is how awareness becomes transformation. Not by thinking more, but by feeling deeper consciously. Shadow work isn't just about seeing the darkness. It's about bringing it home. You're not trying to destroy these parts of you. You're learning to reclaim them. The rage you buried might be the courage you never expressed. The envy you hide could hold your deepest desire to grow. The shame you carry often masks your hunger for connection and love. Jung called this individuation the process of becoming whole. Not perfect, not polished, but real. You stop rejecting who you were. You stop pretending to be who you're not. And slowly you begin to lead your life from the inside out. Because when you make peace with your shadow, you stop leaking power. You stop apologizing for existing. You begin to speak with clarity, walk with weight, and live as someone no longer afraid of their own depth. You won't be told this often, but shadow work hurts. Not because you're becoming someone worse, but because you're finally meeting the parts of yourself you tried to bury. The anger, the envy, the insecurity, the shame, they were always there, but in the dark, they controlled you. Now that you've turned on the light, they scream. Not to scare you, but because they were never meant to be ignored. Carl Jung said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." This is what you're doing now. It's not a clean path. It's raw, emotional, messy, but it's the only path that leads to real power. Not power over others, but power over your reactions, your choices, your life. And once you cross that first threshold, you can never go back to pretending. Facing the shadow is just the beginning. The real transformation happens when you stop fighting it and start listening. That voice of anger may be asking for boundaries. That envy might be pointing to neglected dreams. That sadness may carry truths you never dared to say aloud. When you stop judging these feelings as bad, you begin to see their purpose. They are messengers. And the moment you embrace them, you start integrating them into your consciousness. You no longer act from the wound, you respond from awareness. Jung believed that wholeness does not come from perfection, but from embracing the contradictions within. You are not here to be flawless. You are here to be real. And being real means being everything you are, even the parts you were taught to hide. Integration is not a gentle process. It tears down illusions. It forces you to see the masks you've worn, the roles you've played to be accepted. Sometimes it feels like losing yourself, but in truth, it's the shedding of who you're not. There will be grief. Grief for the years spent running. Grief for the connections built on false identities. But within that grief, a new self begins to emerge. One that no longer needs to please, prove, or perform. This is the pain of rebirth. And like every true birth, it comes with blood, tears, and silence. Jung said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." You are not breaking down. You are breaking open, and that changes everything. When you integrate your shadow, you don't become darker. You become deeper. You are no longer split between who you are and who you pretend to be. You stop leaking energy trying to hide and start radiating from your true core. This is where real power is born. Not the power to dominate others, but the power to remain centered, to live with integrity, to choose your life consciously. It's not an easy path, but it's the only one that leads to freedom. And if you've come this far, it means something in you is already awakening. So ask yourself, are you ready to stop running? Are you ready to meet your shadow? Not to fight it, but to listen to it. If yes, write in the comments, "I choose wholeness." And don't forget, the next video will take you even deeper. See you there.